Hello, everybody. Back again. I'm just going to keep going a little bit more with some Photoshop training. So I want to carry on. I'm going to share my screen for a moment so that you can kind of follow along with me here. One moment. All right, so back in Photoshop, a couple of things that I wanted to mention that I didn't quite get to. We're going to talk about the transform tool, the brushes. Oh, that's on there twice. One second. Get rid of this one for a moment. So again, marquee and then delete off of my layer. So you can see that I have my background, it's blank, and then I created a new layer, right? We want to talk about brush opacity. So I did mention brushes a little bit. So I'm going to hit B, and now I have my brush. And the thing with brushes, let me just go on a new layer. I'm going to Control-Alt-Z. 1, 2, 3, and that gets rid of it on a new layer, right? So my brush. The thing with brushes is that, I'm going to zoom in so you can really kind of see this. We have shape dynamics on. I like using this rough brush. I don't always. It really just is whether I'm lazy enough to change it or not, too lazy to change it or not. It's kind of what it boils down to. So with brushes, especially in digital drawing, you'll find this particular feature useful. Right now, it's at 100% opacity. So you can see at the top here, your brush opacity is sitting at 100%. You can, if you wanted to, make this a little bit more of a see-through brush, and you won't really see the apparentness of that until you overlay different brush strokes. So you can build up your brushes in digital drawing. That is something that you will be doing. Now, the hotkeys for changing the opacity here. So see, you can scrub. So let me just go almost at 100%. If you use the number pad on your keyboard or the number row, the row of numbers across the top of your keyboard, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., you can actually change your opacity that way. So let me change it to 2. So I hit number 2, and I get a very, very, very sort of very transparent brush. You can really, takes a lot of strokes to build that back up. Now hit 0, and that brings it to 100% again. So I'll just do that demo by changing my brush again to this one here, which is that sort of magic marker one. So again, it's sitting at 100%. I'll put it at 10%. I'll put it at 40, just randomly. So you can see just by hitting your numbers, 7, this is 7, and then back to 0, which is 100%. All right, so that's a quick way. So brush opacity. Probably not so much for my drawing courses, but that's something that you might want to know. Let me just go to Navigator for a second. You know what? My Photoshop is freezing a little bit. I gave it too much to do, kind of thing. So sometimes when that happens, I can just sort of, oh, here we go. I caught up. So sometimes I'll just like hit a button down at the bottom, launch one of my other programs that's currently running. So that was brushes. So I'm going to delete that. Brush opacity. There's a lot more that we will be learning about brushes. Not so much in my courses, actually, more so digital drawing, the way to make your own brushes and whatnot. That said, I've also provided on FOL in content week 1, I believe, or even outside of the weeks, a separate brushes that I like to use. Brush files are .abr files, right? Or as Photoshop likes to see them as .abr. So in order to get your brush files that I've provided, for example, into Photoshop, you pretty much just need to navigate to where they are. So I'm just going to show you again how to get to brushes. So you've got your brush selected, your brush tool selected, and you go into here. That's the second icon in, where you can also change the hardness too. I didn't mention that. You can change the hardness and softness of your current brush. show you that in a moment. But in the little settings wheel, the very first icon at the top, you can actually click that and you can see all these different options, and you want to go to import brushes, right? And then you search for your brush file, which is, see it, .avr file. You load it, and then you'll have your new brushes. It'll maybe ask you if you want to append. Do append. It means that you won't lose any of the other brushes that are there. Or, I mean, maybe you do want to lose them all and just replace them, kind of thing. So yeah, that's, I think VGD brushes are all of the ones way down here. And there's so many of them. And play around with those. Like there's some pretty fun brushes. I even made some brushes on my own. This is for a rock texture. It wouldn't be in blue, but that's for digital drawing kind of thing. So anyways, I'm going to delete this layer because I don't need it. And I want to talk about naming layers. So you can see, I'll bring this into the center. You can see that the layers sort of default with default names, layer 2, layer 3, and so on and so forth. I'll create a bunch of them. So layer 2, for example, let's rename that. So you rename it by double clicking onto the word. So tap, tap. So in there, and now you can actually type in what you want to layer it. So I'm gonna, what you want to name it. I'm just gonna name mine instructions. Okay, so that's my instructions layer. Now, the reason why you want to name layers is because you will always be working in a team scenario in the industry, quite likely. And other people sometimes get dropped onto taking over your work because you've been pulled off and gone on to something else. Or maybe you need to get, you need to access somebody else's files. If your files are, you know, sometimes Photoshop files can have hundreds and hundreds of layers. And if you don't take the time to organize them, this person that's going to be using your file later may get kind of frustrated with you. So it's just an efficiency thing more than anything. So please don't be lazy about labeling your layers and also your groups. So let's talk about groups. So let me just do a couple of things here. I'm going to call this one Scribble. Scribble 1, and I'm going to scribble on. I'm just going to set up a couple of layers here. So brush tool again, and I don't want that brush. I want to go back to not VGD, not special brushes. I want to go back to the top here and pick my pencil brush. So yeah, I did upload these the Kyle special brushes. I did upload those to FOL for you guys. And also on Discord, I think. So that's Scribble 1. I'll go up and make a new Scribble. Let's actually change the color of it. So I'm using X again to change my color, background, foreground. And let's just do another scribble next to it. I want you guys to really get practiced at circles. They don't even have to be perfectly circular circles. As you can see, mine are lumpy. That's normal. It's all about your wrist action and your shoulder action and your elbow action. So get in the habit of training your hand. It's more than anything. It's training your hand, not just circles, but straight lines and C curves and backward C curves and S curves. So animation and character design uses a lot of these basic sort of gestures with your hand, right? The S curves and the C curves, especially if you're doing a dynamic pose. I'm going to hide this layer for a moment. So I'm going to call this one circles. And the next one, I'll just kind of give you a little bit of a foreshadowing of what we are going to be kind of doing. Let me hide instructions and let me hide Scribble 1. Circles is here. It's already hidden in this one here. So when we do dynamic posing, which will be next semester for the character design students, but it will be this semester for the animation students. You'll want to really kind of get in the habit of understanding and actually really nailing down like C curves and S curves, you know, to create your characters, that sort of thing. So this is like the gesture of a drawing, and it basically represents the energy of what our skeleton is doing, kind of thing. So how we're moving. So practice, practice, practice. Circles. So I had a teacher at Sheridan College way back when I was in animation named Charlie Bonifacio, and he was such an amazing animator. And what he did was every single day, without, I mean, he wasn't telling us to do it, he was suggesting that we do, but every day he would start off the lecture with circles, a page of circles. To this day, he does this. And that just is to warm up your hands, because it's all about your hand action, your wrist action, your elbow action, right? Just fill an entire page of circles. Get fast at it. The kind of circle we don't want to see in our drawings and our programs is a very slow, possibly lumpy, wiggly circle like this. Now, that said, there's also a tool in Photoshop that might, you know, these kind of circles, not so good, because I'm not using the dynamics, the wrist actions and all that kind. This is definitely me working with my wrist, you know, and get familiar with that. Fill your page, fill your page. Also with straight lines, fill your page. So straight lines are kind of interesting. There tends to be a natural tendency for a straight line to kind of take on an N shape. And you'll find that, let me dump this page. You'll find that if you think about drawing a U shape slightly, right, you can actually find sort of a halfway point, somewhere between the N, which is your natural rotation, and then a U. So you start to get into a straighter line that way. So that, and then the C curves, right? That's just a giant hook. The other direction is a little bit more difficult. And the S curves, or this way. C's and S's, straight lines and circles. That is the skill that you're going to need for this, for either the character design course or the animation course, actually, the 2D animation course. These are going to be characters' heads, you know, any angle. And we'll learn all about that next week, starting next week, kind of thing. So yeah, get to know your get really just comfortable drawing these things. I mean, it doesn't take long, maybe 5 minutes out of your routine to just warm up a little bit. You can even be doing this while I start the class and start lecturing, just to warm yourselves up a little bit. Okay, so let's go back to the discussion about layers and then groups. So I've got, let's call this one circles too. Oh, let's call this one heads, because there's kind of heads on it. And this one I'll call gesture. So I've got, you see already, a lot of layers. Now I hide them as I go. So there's that, there's this one, scribble one. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 gestures, layers, right? And they're a mess. So again, you can use your move tool to move these suckers out of the way, or whatever, or hide them. But say you want them all into a group. So you're going to select one of the layers that's either at the very top of the stack you want to group together, or the bottom one. So I usually pick the bottom one, then you hit Shift and click the top one. So all 4 layers are selected now. And there's a couple of things that we can do with this. We can Control T, which we haven't learned yet, but Control T. You can make all of them move at the same time, right? You can change the opacity of all 4 layers at the same time, things like that. But you can also group them. So let's group them. To group them, you want to hit Control G. And it creates a group. Now that group can be toggled on and off. So why do groups? Because you may actually have more than one group, especially if you now maybe go into a cleanup phase of any of these things. So let's label this group the same way we labeled the layers. So I'm going to go ahead and call that rough. All right, and so that's just so that I know that probably if I was to hand in an assignment, I probably would want to hide the rough unless the instructions in the handout say keep your rough layers visible. So some of my actual assignments are like that. So here is a new layer. Again, I just quickly clicked on that. So I'm going to create that into a group. So again, Control G, and I'm going to label this clean. And at this point, I might, take my rough stuff and change the opacity. Oh, just so you know too, you can change the individual opacity of each layer as well, but it's only going to be as transparent, max transparent as the actual group. So the maximum opacity of the group is 36. So sometimes actually I leave the group like that and just change the individual opacities of this layer. All right, so now we have groups. We can also say, and actually let's just do some cleanup, and then if we kind of like what's going on with our group, which it's a giant scribble, so no, not normally, I would not normally save this, but just to point out some things, I'm going to change my brush now to be black, a cleanup sort of line, and I'm going to change the brush also again to B, and then change it to a nicer cleaning brush. And it's a smoother brush. It's the one that I default to. It's in the generic or general brushes, which I think I showed you earlier. So now I'm gonna just kind of spend some time cleaning up. Now, cleanup is actually easier if your rough stuff is a little more see-through. So change the opacity. Right, so that's my rough. I'm hiding it, and now my clean. So now my clean layer, I would probably have like eyeballs and a nose and all that kind of stuff. That's not particularly clean right now. Oh dear, it's been a long day. So I found out that video editing kind of sucks because it takes so long and there's always mistakes. Anyways, that's not really super clean. I almost would do a preliminary cleanup in blue. So maybe I go blue again. And, so here's something. I'm going to, forget it. I'm just going to hide that. I'm going to do a preliminary, again, I'll do a new layer within the clean, just to bring it into more of a character looking. I need to zoom out. I think I'm too zoomed in here. I don't want to spend too much time drawing because it's more about finding the tools that you're going to need and how to use them than anything else. So let's just say that's our rough, a little bit more resolved. Oh boy. All right, it's a little bit more resolved. And then if I was to actually clean it, I would change the opacity of this layer even more. And now on a new layer, now I would go in with my cleaning brush. I won't even tell you about the whole smoothing option for cleanup. We're not really going to spend a whole lot of time cleaning up too much. If we do, I'll address it as it comes up. But see how everything has curves. Like we really have to train your hand to do C and S curves because we're such organic creatures. Creatures are also organic, kitty cats and puppies and any kind of character. That's training for your arm and your wrist is really, really, really kind of crucial. I'm gonna give this a Chef Boyardee kind of hairstyle. So maybe that would be a little bit cleaner. So now we have our rough. We can hide our rough work and hide our rough. And we would, oh, no eyebrows. That's not super clean, but you get the point, right? So now you might hand that in, or you might hand that in like this. It actually looks kind of nicer with the sketch underneath it. But yeah, clean in a clean group kind of thing. So